I should have walked away the first time I stepped into that basement. The house was too cheap for its size. A 2-story brick mansion on the edge of town, abandoned for decades, yet sold to me for less than the price of a car. The agent shrugged when I asked why. He only said, "Old place, hard to keep up. Locals aren't interested." That should have been a warning. My name is Leonard, and I thought I was lucky. I wanted peace outside the city, a quiet place to start over after a failed marriage. I signed the papers without hesitation and moved in with nothing but boxes and a mattress. For the first few days, the silence felt comforting. The house creaked, but every old house does. The room smelled of dust and wood polish. Nothing seemed out of place until I decided to explore the basement. The door stood at the far end of the kitchen, heavy and painted black. It resisted when I turned the handle, as if something on the other side was holding it shut. After forcing it open, I found a narrow staircase that spiraled down into cold air. The basement stretched wider than I expected, with brick walls and arched ceilings. At the center stood wooden racks filled with bottles. Dozens of them, neatly arranged, each covered with dust so thick that I had to brush it off with my hand. I thought it was a wine cellar. The first label I wiped clean read 1912. Another said 1927. Some went back even further. Whoever had lived here must have been a collector. But there was something wrong. The bottles were not filled with the translucent red of wine. The liquid inside looked darker, thicker, almost black. When I held one to the light, it barely reflected. I should have left them alone, but curiosity got the better of me. That night, after setting up a chair and lamp in the kitchen, I opened the first bottle. The cork crumbled in my hand, releasing a smell I cannot compare to anything else. It wasn't vinegar, not alcohol, not rot. It was heavy, metallic, like old blood mixed with earth. Against my better judgment, I poured it into a glass. The liquid clung to the sides, slow to settle. I didn't drink it, but just holding it made me feel dizzy, as if my head was filled with static. That night, I dreamed of voices, dozens of them, whispering all at once, too faint to understand. In the dream, I was back in the basement. The racks stretched endlessly, further than the walls allowed. I saw shadows moving between them, thin and restless, brushing past me as they whispered. When I woke up, my head throbbed. The glass on the table was empty. I don't remember drinking it, but my mouth tasted like rust. The next day, I went back downstairs. The bottles seemed different now. The dust looked disturbed, as if hands had brushed against them. On one label, faint scratches formed words, "Don't open." I froze, staring at the message. It wasn't there before. I convinced myself I was imagining things. Stress, maybe. But when I touched the bottle, I felt warmth radiating through the glass. The voices returned that night, louder this time. They called my name. Not in unison, but one after another, like people standing in a dark hallway, each leaning forward to whisper as I passed. I tried to ignore them. I buried myself in unpacking, fixing furniture, making the house livable. But every evening, the pressure grew stronger, pulling me toward the basement. I would catch myself standing at the door without remembering how I got there. 3 nights after opening the first bottle, I gave in again. I pulled another from the rack. This one dated 1903. The cork came out too easily, and the smell hit me so hard I staggered back. The liquid inside moved strangely. It didn't pour like liquid should. It stretched, hung in the air for a second before dropping into the glass. When I leaned closer, I swear I heard a faint sigh. That night's dream was different, no longer whispers but clear voices. A woman spoke first, her tone desperate. "Help me. He trapped us." Then a man's voice, "Release us." After them came a chorus of screams, so loud I woke up gasping. The glass was empty again. By the 4th night I understood. Whatever was inside those bottles wasn't wine. It wasn't meant to be opened. Each time I uncorked one, something came out. The house began to change. In the corners of rooms, I saw shapes shifting like smoke. Doors opened by themselves. The air carried a faint echo, as if unseen mouths were breathing beside me. I told myself I should leave, but every time I thought of packing, the cellar pulled me back. The voices promised answers. They promised peace if I only freed them all, and I believed them. The fifth night, I didn't even resist. I walked down the basement stairs as if guided by someone else's hand. The air felt heavier, damp with a smell I couldn't place. I chose another bottle, dated 1894. The glass was darker, thicker than the rest. When I opened it, the liquid hissed softly. The cork shot across the room like something expelled under pressure. A shadow spilled out before the liquid even touched the glass. It rose along the wall, stretched across the ceiling, and vanished into the cracks of the brick. That night I didn't just dream. I felt myself standing in a different place. A hall with no end, lit only by the glow of torches. Hundreds of figures stood around me, their faces blurred, their eyes hollow. They spoke together, demanding, pleading, begging me to open more. When I woke up, I realized something chilling. The bottles were not sealed with cork alone. Every one of them carried a mark at the top, almost invisible. Symbols carved into the glass. Old letters, maybe Latin. A binding. It dawned on me that these were not wines. Each bottle was a prison, and inside each, a soul. The whispers grew unbearable. They didn't fade in the daylight anymore. Even in the morning, while I brewed coffee, I heard voices behind me, faint but sharp, as if someone leaned over my shoulder. At night, they screamed. I tried to fight back. I nailed the basement door shut, stacked furniture against it, and even slept in my car. But no matter where I went, I felt them. In the silence of the road, in the wind outside the windows, in the radio static. They followed me. One evening, as I sat in the living room, a bottle rolled across the floor. It shouldn't have been there. The basement was sealed, yet the bottle lay at my feet, vibrating slightly. The label read 1888. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The liquid inside pulsed, glowing faintly red this time. I didn't open it. I placed it back on the kitchen table and stared at it until dawn. But the next night, another appeared. Then another. They wanted out, and they weren't going to stop. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw faces pressing against glass, mouths open in endless cries. I began to understand their stories. Some were criminals, their souls bound as punishment. Others were innocent, caught in whatever ritual had sealed them here. Each one begged for release. Each one promised me something different: wealth, love, power, forgiveness. By the seventh night, my will collapsed. I carried a hammer to the kitchen and smashed a bottle against the sink. The room went black. The air turned ice cold. A figure rose from the shards, its body made of smoke, its face shifting between human and inhuman. For a moment, it looked at me with burning eyes, then vanished into the walls. The house groaned. The pipes rattled. The walls cracked. More bottles rolled across the floor, clinking against one another, as if celebrating freedom. I realized too late what I had done. Now, every corner of the house is alive. Shadows move on their own. Cold hands grip my shoulders when I sleep. The voices no longer whisper. They scream in my ears until I can't think straight. I tried to leave. The front door won't open. The windows show nothing but darkness outside, no matter the time of day. The house has me. The cellar keeps calling. There are still dozens of bottles down there. I feel them waiting, pressing against the glass, watching me, and I know one by one I'll open them all, because I don't have a choice anymore. I will never forget the night we stepped into that abandoned psychiatric hospital. The place had been empty for decades, yet the silence felt alive, like something was waiting. We were four that evening. Clara, with her endless curiosity. Marcus, who always pretended not to be afraid of anything. Evelyn, who carried a flashlight and muttered that this was a bad idea. And me, caught between excitement and dread. The building stood at the edge of town, fenced off with rusted wire. Locals whispered about missing people, strange lights at night, and screams that came from the basement. We had heard the stories for years, but standing there in the fading twilight made them feel less like rumors and more like warnings. Clara pushed first. She found a gap in the fence, slipped through, and motioned for us to follow. We moved quickly across the overgrown courtyard. The hospital loomed above us, windows shattered, paint peeling, its broken roofline silhouetted against the last orange glow of the sun. Inside, the air was stale. Dust hung heavy, mixed with the faint stench of mold and something metallic, like rust or blood. We walked through the entrance hall, our footsteps echoing too loudly. Wheelchairs lay overturned. A cracked gurney rested against a wall, its straps frayed and stiff. Marcus laughed nervously. "Creepy, but not that bad," he said. His voice bounced off the walls and came back sounding strange, as if someone else had spoken. Evelyn told him to shut up. We followed a long hallway lined with patient rooms. Doors stood half open, revealing broken beds, scattered medical charts, and graffiti left by other trespassers. But what drew us deeper were the signs pointing toward the basement. Clara insisted that was where the real secrets waited. The staircase downward was narrow, concrete chipped and damp. As we descended, the smell grew stronger, almost chemical. Evelyn hesitated, saying we should turn back, but Clara's determination kept us moving. The basement was a maze of corridors. Pipes ran along the ceilings, dripping water into puddles that reflected our flashlight beams. At first we thought the place was empty, then we saw the doors. They lined the walls, iron and heavy, each with a small slot at eye level. Rust had eaten away the locks, but most were still shut tight. Some had deep scratches on the surface, as if someone inside had tried to claw their way out. I felt a cold shiver crawl across my skin. "What were these rooms for?" I whispered. Clara answered, "Isolation chambers. That's what they used back then. But look." She pointed at a shelf where several dusty ledgers sat stacked. Their covers were brittle, faded with time, but the pages inside were filled with neat handwriting. Patient names, dates, observations, and then, abruptly, the word disappeared. We flipped through one after another. Different patients, same fate. Each journal ended with that word, disappeared. Marcus frowned. So they just stopped existing. No release date, no transfer, nothing. Evelyn's hands shook as she held the book. It's like they erased them. Like they were taken. Clara, too fascinated to stop, began reading the names aloud, one after another. Her voice echoed through the corridor, carried down the branching halls. I wanted to tell her to stop, but something in the air kept me silent, as if listening. The corridor shifted. I can't explain it better. The light seemed to bend. Shadows thickened at the edges of our vision, moving when we stood still. The dripping of water grew louder, rhythmic, almost like footsteps. Marcus aimed his flashlight down the hall. "Did you see that?" he asked. At the edge of the beam, a figure stood for just a second before melting back into darkness. Evelyn gasped. "We're not alone down here." Then we heard voices, soft, overlapping whispers, speaking from inside the locked rooms. The slots in the doors rattled, as if unseen eyes pressed against them, watching us. One word repeated, carried on those whispers, "Stay." I turned to Clara. She looked pale but refused to stop. She whispered the last name from the ledger, almost like a ritual. That was when the shadows left the walls. They stretched across the floor, filling the hall like black smoke, and formed shapes almost human. Their faces had no features, but their movements told us everything. They wanted someone to remain in the rooms. Someone had to take the place of those who had disappeared. Marcus swore under his breath, stepping back. "This isn't funny anymore. We have to get out." The shadows did not let us move easily. Every step backward felt like pushing against water. The air grew colder. The whispers turned into cries, pleading, demanding. And then, one of the doors slammed open with a crash that shook the entire basement. The iron door stood wide, its hinges screaming as if they had not been moved in decades. Beyond the threshold lay nothing but blackness, deeper than the rest of the basement. The smell that poured out made my stomach twist, a mixture of rust, damp, and something older, rotten. Evelyn clutched my arm so tightly her nails dug into my skin. "Don't look inside," she whispered, but Clara already had her flashlight raised. The beam cut into the dark, revealing the room's interior. Chains hung from the ceiling. A narrow bed stood against the wall, its straps stiff with age. On the floor lay more journals, scattered as if thrown in anger. The walls were scratched with desperate words, carved deep into the stone. Words like help, trapped, and no escape. And then came the sound. A dragging step, slow and deliberate, from within that cell. Clara froze. Marcus cursed under his breath. The shadows in the hall seemed to lean closer, as if waiting. A figure stepped forward into the beam. It wasn't solid. Its body flickered between flesh and darkness. Its face blurred, but its eyes glowed faintly white. It lifted a trembling hand and pointed directly at Clara. "Your turn," it said in a voice that was more breath than sound. Clara dropped her flashlight, the beam spinning wildly across the walls. She'd backed away, shaking her head. No, I didn't mean anything. I was just reading." The other doors began to rattle violently, one after another, until the entire corridor roared with metal clanging and inhuman voices. Each shadow pressed closer, reaching out with long, stretched hands. Marcus grabbed Clara's wrist. "Run!" he shouted, pulling her toward the stairs. Evelyn and I followed, but the air felt thick, every breath like inhaling ice. The corridor seemed longer than before, stretching endlessly. No matter how fast we moved, the stairs stayed distant. Behind us, the shadows rushed forward in a wave, whispering and crying out the names Clara had spoken. Evelyn stumbled, nearly falling. I pulled her up, dragging her forward. "Don't stop," I yelled. We reached the staircase at last, but Marcus's grip loosened. Clara screamed, and when I turned, she was gone. Not pulled, not dragged, gone, as if the darkness had swallowed her whole. Marcus shouted her name into the void, his voice echoing against the concrete walls. Something answered him, repeating his words back in a mocking tone. We didn't wait. Evelyn pushed Marcus up the stairs while I covered the rear, my flashlight flickering as the shadows climbed after us. They did not move like people, but like smoke pulled by a draft, surging upward with unnatural speed. We burst into the main floor, gasping for air. The building above seemed different now. The halls stretched crooked, and doors we had passed before were no longer where we left them. The hospital itself felt alive, bending to trap us. "Keep moving," I shouted. We ran through room after room until we found the broken entrance hall. The main doors were ahead, but when Marcus reached them, they slammed shut on their own. The crash shook dust from the ceiling. We were trapped again. The air grew colder still. Shapes moved between the broken windows. They pressed against the glass, dozens of them, faceless and restless. Each one whispered the same demand: "Stay." Marcus banged on the doors until his fists bled. Evelyn cried quietly, whispering Clara's name, and I stood frozen, realizing the truth. The journals had not only documented the missing, they had been a warning. Once the names were spoken, the patients were called back, and they needed replacements. The shadows gathered around us, circling, waiting for one of us to step forward. And when they did, they whispered something new. Not just stay. This time, they whispered my name. I grew up in a quiet town that never made the news, a place where nothing ever happened, or at least that was what people liked to say. We had one school, one grocery store, and one church. The church was the center of the community, standing tall with its stone walls and bell tower. The priest, Father Raymond, had been there longer than anyone could remember. His face was weathered, his voice calm, and his sermons always carried a strange weight, as if he was holding back more than he said. Parents trusted him. Children feared him. I never knew why, but I always felt something wrong when he looked at me, like he could see things I hadn't done yet. Rumors spread among us teenagers about the church basement. We all knew there was one. The heavy wooden door at the back of the church led down a set of locked stairs. Nobody was allowed inside. Adults avoided talking about it. But at night, if you walked near the church, you could hear something beneath the ground. It wasn't pipes or wind. It sounded like faint moans, low and broken, as if someone was trapped down there. I asked my mother about it once. She told me to stop asking. She said Father Raymond kept church records and old relics there, nothing more. But her eyes shifted when she said it, like she didn't even believe herself. The thought of that hidden basement grew inside me like an itch. I couldn't shake it off. My friends joked about breaking in, but nobody actually tried. I couldn't stop thinking about the sounds. I told myself I'd never forgive myself if I didn't find out the truth. One Friday evening, when the sky was heavy with clouds and the streets were almost empty, I made my move. The church was unlocked. Father Raymond often left it open for evening prayer. I slipped inside, heart hammering in my chest, the wooden floor creaking under my sneakers. Candles flickered near the altar, casting shadows that seemed to move too slowly. I passed the pews and walked to the back, where the forbidden door stood. The padlock was gone. In its place, a simple latch held it shut, as if someone wanted me to go down. I hesitated. My ears rang with silence, broken only by the soft dripping sound coming from below. I pulled the latch. The door groaned as it opened, releasing a draft of damp air that smelled like mold and something metallic, like rust or dried blood. The stone steps stretched into darkness. My phone's flashlight lit only a few feet at a time. Each step felt colder, the air heavier. The deeper I went, the more I realized the sounds I had heard outside were real. A muffled voice whispered, followed by another. It wasn't the wind. At the bottom, the passage opened into a cavern-like basement. Ancient stone walls were lined with niches holding candles, their wax dripping onto the floor in hardened rivers. At the center stood an altar made of blackened stone. Around it were wooden tables stacked with old books, bound in leather and cracked with age. Some pages were loose, covered in messy handwriting that looked rushed, desperate. I stepped closer. On one of the altars lay what looked like remains of rituals. Burnt incense sticks, bones that looked disturbingly human, and strange symbols carved into the stone floor. The smell grew stronger, almost choking me. My curiosity overpowered the fear. I picked up one of the books. The cover was plain, but the pages inside made me freeze. Each page listed names, dates, and sins. Not vague ones, but exact details. Theft, infidelity, lies told in secret, violence that never became public. Every resident of the town was there. Even my parents, things I had never heard before. The air grew colder as I turned the pages. My fingers shook. Then I saw it, my own name. The page wasn't filled like the others. It was blank except for a few words. I leaned closer. It read, "He will break the lock. He will walk down the stairs. He will read these words." I dropped the book, my chest tight. I hadn't done any of those things until this very moment, yet the page described them perfectly. I backed away, but my foot hit another book on the floor. It flicked open on its own. The pages began to fill in, letter by letter, as if an invisible hand was writing in real time. The text spelled out my next movement. He will try to leave. I froze. My phone's battery icon flashed red. The light dimmed for a second before stabilizing. I looked around, panic rising. Every table was covered with books, and every book began to shift, their pages fluttering as if something beneath them was alive. I tried to run back to the stairs. My breath caught in my throat as I realized the door above had closed. The latch clicked on its own. The books grew louder, their pages turning faster. The sound echoed like thousands of whispers layered on top of each other. My own name appeared over and over again, filling the margins of dozens of volumes. I shouted, my voice breaking. "Who's there?" The whispering stopped. For a moment, silence pressed in. Then I heard a slow set of footsteps on the stone floor behind me. I turned. Father Raymond stood at the far end of the basement. His face was calm, almost kind, but his eyes were sharp, glowing faintly in the dim candlelight. He clasped his hands behind his back and spoke as if he had been waiting for me all along. "You shouldn't have come here." I froze where I stood. My body wanted to run, but my legs refused to move. Father Raymond walked slowly toward the altar, his shoes scraping on the stone floor. He didn't look surprised to see me. If anything, he looked relieved. "You heard the voices, didn't you?" he said, his tone quiet, almost tender. "That's why you came down here." I swallowed hard. "What is this place?" He touched the edge of one of the books with care, almost like he was stroking a child's face. "This is the weight I carry for all of you. Every secret, every sin, every betrayal. Written down before they happen. Preserved forever. The foundation of this town rests on these pages." My eyes darted to the books. The one with my name was still open, and words kept appearing. "He will question the priest. He will not like the answer." I felt my throat close. This isn't possible. "How can these books know?" "They don't just know," Father Raymond said. "They demand. The sins must be recorded. The guilty must be acknowledged. That's why I forbid anyone from coming here. Knowledge changes a man before the deed is done. Now it's too late for you." I shook my head, backing away. "I didn't do anything. I'm not guilty of anything." The priest smiled faintly, but it wasn't comforting. Not yet. The candles flickered violently, though no wind touched them. The sound of pages turning filled the basement again, louder this time, echoing through the stone walls. Dozens of books now displayed my name. Sentences crawled across them in black ink. They listed actions I hadn't even thought about, petty lies, acts of anger, betrayals that made my stomach twist. I shouted, "Stop it, I would never do those things." Father Raymond looked at me with pity. "The books never lie. You think you're different, but none of us are. They reveal who you really are, not who you imagine yourself to be." I stumbled toward the stairs, but the latch held firm. My hands beat against the wood, my voice breaking into a hoarse scream. I didn't want to turn around, but I heard the priest's calm voice behind me. "You can't run from yourself." The whispering of the books rose again, forming a chorus that circled the room. My phone slipped from my hand and shattered on the stone floor. In the dark, the candlelight threw monstrous shapes against the walls. I forced myself to look back. Father Raymond stood in the center, surrounded by the books. The shadows clung to him, making his figure stretch unnaturally tall. "I protected this town from its own truth," he said, "but now the burden shifts. Once you are written into these pages, they claim you. I can't stop it. No one can." I pressed my back against the door, trembling. "Then why did you let me in? Why was the lock gone?" He tilted his head. "Because it wasn't my choice. The books wanted you. They always choose. The books grew louder, the pages whipping like wings. One volume on the altar snapped open, glowing with faint red light. My name filled every line until there was no space left. Then, to my horror, new words etched themselves across the page in jagged strokes. He will replace the priest. I stared at Father Raymond. His face was pale now, drained of all calm. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. "It has begun," he whispered. "You've been chosen." My chest tightened as if invisible hands gripped me. The candles flickered out, plunging the basement into near darkness. Only the glow from the book lit the room. The air grew suffocating, filled with the smell of smoke and decay. Father Raymond stepped closer, but his movements were weak, unsteady. "I carried this for decades," he said. "I thought I could keep it. But the books, they never forgive. They never release." His knees buckled. He collapsed to the ground, clutching his chest, his breaths ragged. I rushed toward him without thinking, but stopped when I saw the shadows crawling over his skin like black veins. His eyes met mine one last time. "Don't fight it. If you do, the whole town will pay." His body stilled. The basement fell silent, except for the scratching of pens that weren't there, continuing to write in the endless books. I stood over him, frozen, while the words in the glowing volume shifted again. "He will stay." The latch on the door above clicked open. I could have run. I could have fled the basement, left the church behind, tried to forget everything I saw. But my legs wouldn't move. My eyes locked on the open pages, where countless names and deeds filled the parchment like a tide of ink. And then I realized the whispers weren't coming from the books anymore. They were inside my head. Every thought, every doubt, every dark impulse I tried to bury, they were already being written down. The glow of the book dimmed. The pages stopped. The silence pressed in again. I walked to the altar and placed my hand on the cover. For a moment, the weight of the entire town rested on my shoulders. Their sins, their secrets, their future. The church bells rang above, though no one had touched them. I understood then what Father Raymond meant. The role wasn't chosen by men. It was forced by something older, something that lived beneath the stone. When I finally climbed the stairs and stepped into the empty church, the night air felt heavier. The door shut behind me without a sound. Nobody saw me leave. Nobody asked what I found. But when I looked at the townspeople the next day, I knew their hidden truths. The books had already shown me. Their whispers stayed with me, louder than any sermon. And when a child asked why the church basement was always locked, I gave the same answer Father Raymond once gave. Because some doors are not meant to be opened.